every issue we are experiencing at the moment can be resolved by our return to deep communication with the natural order of things.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Food Matters podcast, your home for nutrition, health, and wellness education. My name is Laurentine. I am a filmmaker and a nutritionist and the founder of foodmatters.com, and I'm here to hold your hand on this journey to optimum health, transformation, and emotional healing. Hello, Food Matters community. Hello and welcome. Welcome to another Food Matters podcast, and I have the honor and pleasure to be joined here with my sister, Cathy Coyle. Hello, Cathy from Ireland. How are you?
Hi, Laurentine. I'm very well, thank you. How are you today?
Really good. So, Cathy, I've had the pleasure of working with you, and I'm so grateful for our time together. And we would love to hear a little bit more about your background. And as a clinical psychologist and then specializing in shaman wisdom, I'd love to hear how this journey all started for you.
Thanks, Laurentine. Okay, where to begin? So I suppose my background is I have actually a master's in applied psychology, so research psychology based. And I was on the pathway of moving in to do a doctorate in clinical psychology, but I didn't fully move into the clinical side of things. I was at a bridge place in my calling, I suppose you would say. I was at a bridge in my calling, and I had known that I wanted to work in a therapeutic context with people, and I'd started to develop a very keen interest in the psychedelic renaissance, so the use of psychedelics to treat PTSD and atypical depression and a whole host of therapeutic issues. And so I was immersing myself in my training and my accreditation, and I was working with mentors and people that were already working with psychedelic facilitation in the field and kind of upskilling in preparation for one day moving into that arena once I had finished my clinical doctorate. But Spirit had other plans for me, and when I finished my master's and I was deep in application processes for doctorate study, postdoctorate study at various universities in Ireland to do my clinical training, I decided that I was going to find a mentor that could support me in understanding the realms of entheogens, so the realm of the psychedelic mushroom in my case, as a sort of a grounding for when I would finish my clinical training and I would want to move into this therapeutic support. I really wanted to understand what these medicines did for a person and what the experience of them was. And so I found a mentor, an amazing woman called Shauna Home, and in the United States, and she's very well respected, the author of several books and a major contributor to the women's narrative on the shamanic or the medicine path in many ways. And so I connected with Shauna, and that opened me into a very deep mentorship with the mushroom. And when I came to the mushroom, it became very, very apparent very quickly that the way that I was supposed to work with the mushroom wasn't in the clinical context that I was navigating myself towards, which would be in a very highly clinical setting, blindfold, headphones in a clinic setting, which is a lot of the work that's happening now, which is incredible. And there's really powerful healings coming through that for many, many people, and a huge potential going forward for therapeutic, for new therapeutic supports. But when I came to exploring, it became quite apparent that the way that I was supposed to work, or the way that my soul was calling to be worked with, was in a much more rooted in tradition, basically, and rooted in the traditions of my land, which has a very, very deep culture of working with these medicines for visionary states and for healing and for communicating with nature or communicating with the divine. And I started to go through a series of, I wouldn't spontaneous in some ways, but also, guided by spirit. But I started to go through a series of activations and initiations that led me into a very, very different way of working with psilocybin. And now I'm studying for a PhD in transpersonal psychology. I work as a transpersonal coach, and I work in a sort of a therapeutic context with breath work and more transpersonal approaches, which is beautiful because it is the other alternative branch. If you don't want to go down the clinical route and you are wanting to really merge more of a spiritual dimension into the psychology practice, then the transpersonal psychology path, which is deeply also linked into the mysticism of the psychedelic experience in many ways. There's a lot of very deep learnings from the transpersonal dimension there.
That is beautiful. Well explained. Thank you. And so nice that our audience can get to know you through this path. I know that the listeners, we are all very familiar with "Let thy food be thy medicine" and the ethos of food matters and how we use food as medicine on a daily basis. And I've personally worked with you as well, doing different types of dietas where we work with different plants and the rose, and I've personally worked through different plants in nature as well, with oak and even with home medicinal plants that I use on a day-to-day basis, like my turmeric, which I now have a conversation with in my garden. But in regards to plant medicines, is this for everybody? Is there a certain person that this is not for, that this is for? How do we know we're on the cold path?
I think an interesting place to start as well is even on the concept of plant medicine. So I think there's been this kind of cultural gravitation now that when we say plant medicines, that we're speaking of entheogenic medicines or psychedelic medicines in many ways. So like ayahuasca or San Pedro, psilocybin mushrooms, different altering medicines. But I really feel there's a beautiful narrative that when we speak to plant medicines, that it is all of the plants, that, like you mentioned, in my work, I work with oak, I work with rose, I work with different flowers and different indigenous trees. And for me, those teachings that are non-psychedelic based are equally, if not even sometimes more important than the altering type plants. And so really just expanding the conversation that you can work with a plant medicine and you can have a very deep healing and a very deep transformation, even without the deeper psychedelic type experience, because there's different ways through fasting and visioning in nature and just sitting with the trees or sitting with the plants. There are different ways that we can move into a more subtle type experience and receive very deep wisdom and very deep healing from the plants. But in terms of a psychotropic or entheogenic plant medicine, and are they for everybody? My honest answer is no. I wouldn't say that they're for everybody. And as a therapist, in my therapeutic practice, as well as in my integration practice, I work a lot with helping people prepare to make a decision if they're going to partake in a plant medicine. And I also work with people who have worked with other facilitators and maybe are having difficult difficulty in integrating their experiences afterwards. So I see the whole spectrum basically of people that are called or people who have come out the other side. And what I would say is that it's really essential that you find a very skilled facilitator if you are going to go down this road, and that you find reviews if you can, try and connect in some way, shape or form to other people that have maybe worked with this facilitator if that is available to you. Ask questions, be curious, don't just jump on it immediately because the offer has come or someone has told you about a circle that's happening, or really, really do some research and really consider ways that you can begin to prepare for your experience. So reading books, doing research, and just understanding what the level of transformation can be. Because if you are, on certain medications, if there is a history of specific types of psychosis or underlying psychiatric issues, then these medicines can actually do more harm than good. And really having an honest conversation about this is essential to the community, because there's a lot of kind of rogue shamans out there who are just facilitating and not really doing the proper checks to make sure that the space is appropriate to the individual. So in my work, when people come to work with me, there's a very long process. I take people through non-psychedelic spaces for a few months before I feel safe to take them into an entheogenic space. So we work with breath work for preparation. We work with developing metaphors so that they've got deeper access to the language that will help them process the experience after. We work a lot with somatics and getting in tune with the body, getting in tune with the body's communication and what the body is saying, what the body is trying to release. So there's some beautiful facilitators out there. And if you get yourself with the right facilitator, they will know whether it's appropriate for you or not. And I think as well, if you are called and you do go to a plant medicine, allowing the integration window afterwards. So if you sit with ayahuasca, for example, allow yourself a couple of months to integrate that experience. Don't jump to the next medicine or the next medicine, because I see this a lot as well, where people are doing a lot of medicines in a year and they're not allowing themselves the integration window that their spirit requires, that their body requires, that their nervous system really requires, so that they can have the value of the deep transformation that they've gone through. Because the transformation is profound. These are medicines that can radically change everything about your being in one sitting. That can, with psilocybin, you can heal decades of unresolved PTSD in one sitting. And similarly with ayahuasca and San Pedro, you can release lifelong trauma from the body in one single sitting, and then everything can be transformed for you. But the deep understanding that with that level of transformation often can come a period of discomfort afterwards, because you have to now integrate this new way of being into your life structure, which hasn't really changed. But when you change that radically, then you have to also reorientate the life around you. And that can be challenging in many ways. So really allowing yourself the space and finding out deeper curiosity into integration process, I think is a critical step. So is it for everyone? It's a yes and a no. It's really depending on the skill of the facilitator in terms of where the individual's issues are at. In the wrong facilitator's hands, an undiagnosed mental health issue can become a crisis situation afterwards. So these are just some of the really honest and radical questions we need to ask when we are considering to step into this path.
So true, so true. And that's why I felt so grateful to be able to work with you, Cathy, on my spiritual journey. And Cathy has been my mentor and my coach for all of last year, and I was so grateful to also take part in the sisterhood when we did the Ascension Magic course. And one of my specific practices that I really still enjoy today was and we were cleansing our body, we were using very clean diet, no alcohol, very limiting certain types of foods that are stimulating. And we were also journeying together with a lot of our sisters that you've created in your sisterhood. And we did this beautiful practice where we dieted on rose, and we used rose in our diet every day. And we allowed the rose to start to speak to us. And you specifically asked us to go in nature for a night ritual. So an evening where we spent all night underneath the moon and the stars, and we received some divine wisdom, we received cleansing, we received healing. And could you tell us a little bit more, or tell the audience a little bit more about what the intention was of this type of, I guess, non-psychedelic spiritual evolution for people that are interested in just slowly starting ourselves out into the world of plant medicine?
Yes, it's beautiful that you bring this up, because I'm currently working a 4-month women's visionary leadership program, and this week we're actually preparing for the nature vigils. So it's an interesting time to speak about this, because I'm actively holding 11 women through that process as we speak. Actually, this process is happening, and so in my own development, the further into the initiations I moved, and the more teachers that showed up for me. So I work with an amazing woman, Marta Fabregas. She's a Celtic Iberian shaman, and she's one of my core teachers and mentors in how I have been initiating with the tree consciousness. So she's busy working me through the sacred trees of Ireland. So at the moment, I've just closed a year-long initiation with the oak tree, and I'm moving into initiation with the hazel tree. As we speak, I'm preparing to go and do a nature vigil or a vision quest with the hazel tree for a week. So in my own practice, what I do is I will go to my teacher's land, and she prepares an elixir for me, and then I go and I stay in isolation in the forest for 7 days. I fast, and she comes each morning and she prepares an elixir for me. She gives me the elixir. We do a little bit of a check-in just to make sure, everything's okay for maybe 15 minutes, and then she leaves, and I stay in isolation for the remainder of the day, and I drink the elixir, which is made from the tree that I am learning from, that I'm initiating with. So that's kind of how one element of my own personal shamanistic practice, and how I grow as a facilitator, and how I grow in my communion with the land and the trees of the land and the ancestors of the land. So what I do is I take that system and I work it in various ways with the women that I work with. So it has scales. If you are working on a very deep level of initiation with me, sometimes people work with me from anywhere up to 3 years, where they come and they stay with me and they do quite intensive initiatory work. And those women would go through sort of 3-day quests in nature, where they're just sitting out with the elements, fasting, ingesting. Perhaps it's the holly tree, or perhaps it's the rose. It depends. And so then I have a different scale when I'm working with women remotely, or if I'm working with a group container, like the container that you were in, Laurentine, or the container that I'm working at the moment. Then I always will tie in a rewilding aspect. So that usually looks like a woman sort of choosing how a reintroduction to the wild in a new way. And so I could say, maybe you can only manage 3 hours, because for some women, that's quite a big deal, sitting out without any technology in a remote area for 3 hours. It's enough for them because it's very, very new. Then kind of in your case, because you have a lot of experience being out in nature and being in remote locations and whatnot, a 12-hour overnight is accessible to you, that's digestible, and it also brings in just enough challenge that you're meeting the experience in a new way. And so what I like to do is bring a plant ally into the work. So usually if I'm working remotely, then I will work with the medicine of rose, because the rose is the rose grows on every part of the earth. You will find roses, and it has one of the most vast root systems on the planet. So you have this sort of natural vibratory field of the rose that sort of spans across the planet. And so when we're working remotely, and say we're 13 women and we are all partaking in daily, sitting and meditating and drinking rose tea, and sitting with the rose, smelling the rose, body oiling with the rose, just bringing this consciousness really into our awareness in a new way. And then taking that journey to going out and sitting out under the moon for 12 hours, or potentially just sitting out in nature for 24 hours. Some women are ready for that sort of more intensive deep dive into the natural world. And what this does is it just really opens our subtle awareness of the communication of nature. So we're coming to nature with even more receptivity and openness to witness it, and to receive inspiration, to receive healing, to receive insight. I like to work with the vision quest element, or a mini vision quest element, with the women that I work with, especially the women who are kind of more leaders in their fields. So they're CEOs or psychiatrists or whatnot, and they're very, they're progressive in their field. And what this does is it creates a beautiful container for them to really go and just hear themselves on a very, very deep soul level, really give their soul opportunity to communicate, so that they can bring that medicine back to their communities. And I think that this is the guidance from all of the native tribes, all across the world. Each native culture has its own form of what the Native Americans would call the vision quest, or what we would call sitting out or nature vigiling. Every culture has this, where they would leave the village and go out into the wild, go out into nature for an extended period, and they would receive inspiration and insight and wisdom, and they'd also mature in that space. So they go through a kind of another layer of initiation into adulthood. And then when they come back, they've brought back that medicine and that wisdom for the village. So I really like to apply this when I'm working with women who are in leadership positions, that, okay, if you want to really lead and you want to be progressive about how you're leading, then we have to carve out this space for ourselves to really be able to hear ourselves think. And that means getting outside into nature, disconnecting from everything, and just simply sitting without distraction and observing how nature works, because there's so much inspiration when you observe all of the elements, the ecosystems, the fungi, the fruits, and when you observe all of this and really observe it for an extended window, then you bring that lesson and you bring that learning back with you.
If you're looking for a one-stop shop for everything nutrition, health, and wellness related, make sure you head to foodmatters.com and sign up to the Food Matters newsletter. And we'll be able to send you healthy recipes from Thanksgiving, Christmas, and recipes from the Food Matters recipe book, as well as tips and tricks on how to stay, live, and eat healthy, as well as looking after our gut microbiome and how to make sure that we age gracefully. Well, that is so how I felt. I'm so grateful to have gone through this experience with your sisterhood and with you as mentor. And I remember one of the profound, I'll actually share with you some of the profound, I would have spoken to you and the sisterhood about it, but I'm glad that I can now share it with a wider audience and some of the profound effects that this had on me. The nature vigil, one of the things is it brought my cycle back into a full moon cycle, so where I bleed on the full moon. I also received divine guidance in a form of meditation that I now use and practice every day, where I actually visualized myself growing roots into the earth, and especially here in Vanuatu, where I have developed a specific relationship now with the land. I'm feeling very rooted into this land, and I'm feeling so connected that I'm actually feeling, when I stand on the ground, I actually feel my roots going into Mother Earth and sucking up the nutrients and allowing that energetic exchange with Mother Nature and the frequency of the earth to be embodied through me. So that was something that was very powerful and specifically happened during this 12-hour overnight in a very remote space in I would call the jungle of Vanuatu, which, like you said, it's not for everybody, but the opportunity to be able to do this and sit with nature and actually spend time with the elements outdoors allowed me to receive this divine guidance. And I even think that my skin changed. I actually feel that there was some sort of a healing element that it healed part of. I actually have a different facial feature after this event, and my mum and my sister have noticed this. So there is specific changes that can happen when we do this type of work and when we do this type of plant medicine work. And I would love you to speak a little bit more about how we can integrate this, because one of my biggest things was when I left Vanuatu and I left the beauty and the safety of what I created here, I jumped out and it all became a bit too much for me. I actually went through a period of time where the elements around me, the energies around me, people's energies, I was so affected by it. I had become very sensitive to that, and I had forgotten how to practice the art of protecting myself. And I actually suffered from anxiety, and I went through a period of time where I was confused and I couldn't get my feet on, I literally couldn't find my feet, literally allowing me to come back to Vanuatu and again preparing myself now in a deeper way so that this doesn't happen. So is there something that you could talk to in respect to anyone else going through that experience and how we can best handle that?
Well, one thing I'd actually just like to start with there before I move into the sort of energetics of what's happening is when we're speaking of the vigil or the nature immersion, one thing that I'm actually working through at the moment is I have clients who are in areas where nature vigiling is almost impossible for them. So I have a woman in my current weave, and she's living in Dubai. And I don't know if you've ever been to Dubai, but Dubai it's not exactly, you don't have lush green forests and yeah, it's skyscrapers, it's big city, it's desert. There's not really much space for a woman to get out and access the rawness of nature. Like, whereas here in Ireland, if I'm working with Irish women, we have lots of forests, we have lots of rivers, it's very safe. There's options. Similarly, I have clients who are in upstate New York, and yeah, you even though you're in New York City, you can still get you're within a reasonable access of getting into a nature space with a little bit of preparation and planning. But there are women who are in areas that are, this isn't very accessible to them. So I've been trying to sort of come up with solutions-based ways of supporting women who are sort of living in the reverse to you, who are in the cities, and we kind of need to help find routes for them to maybe plan a retreat or travel, and just to get that breathing window into their year. And so that's been interesting for me, because I hear you. I'm also having to navigate that kind of reverse reorientation into density when you've been in a very clear space. And I think for you in particular, having been in Vanuatu, I mean, when I go into the forest for a week, or even back in May, I did a extended dieta with mapacho, which is tobacco, and I was in isolation drinking tobacco for 2 weeks. And when I came back out, it was really disorientating. Like I couldn't go to a supermarket. I kind of needed to get home, and my partner needed to look after things for a little while, because for you, I think coming from Vanuatu,
in the safety of our environment. So I actually spent 2 years in Vanuatu because I was locked down here during COVID. So it was that cocooning element, and then, delving deeper into this work because I had the time and the space to be able to work with you. So it was a time where I was able to go deeper with this practice.
Yeah. And then Vanuatu in and of itself, it's literally a paradise. So I can understand why the intensity of, being in Spain and being in Australia and all of these, like, a completely different vibration. But even beyond that, because I know a lot of people are struggling with this, where they're feeling over-synthesized when they're going into the city or when they're going into public. And it used to be something that affected me, but not so much anymore as I've become more and more embodied. It's much easier, but it definitely takes time and practice. And I think the thing with it is we just really need to be gentle with ourselves, because we're going through such intense recalibrations. We really are shifting at a cellular level. Our bodies are changing in density. And when we're orientating into new spaces and new systems, and we are picking up information from the environment, we're scanning the environment in new ways, we're lifting the vibration of people around us, we're lifting the density of spaces. And so it can be quite challenging. But what I say to that is that I don't believe anything is by chance. So if you are if you find yourself in London, or you find yourself in Dubai, or you find yourself in these major hubs, then there's probably a very big reason why you are in that area, because we are consistently contributing our vibration to the world around us. And so wherever we go, we bring that resonance with us. And it's often just the adjustment to the vibrational shift that's happening. And now you are very open. So you're processing, 10,000 people who just drank a lot of coffee and they're rushing to work. And it is that anxiety space. So it's very natural that you would feel it, and then you would begin to identify it as your own. And I think that's the challenge, where people think, oh my goodness, am I now suffering from anxiety? But it's literally that you are picking up the vibratory field from around you. So even the simple act of being able to subtly identify when it isn't your own, and then be able to just breathe through it and stay present with it,
No, that's so true, and you're right. Let's touch on those for those that I feel that there's so many of our sisters around the world that are getting these awakenings, that are opening up to the energies of the solar system and what's happening right now. I feel that we're going through some interesting changes with the welcoming of the new earth, and maybe if there's some things that you can touch on in regards to how we can heal more, or how we can understand more about anxiety and depression, and for those that are living in big cities, for those that are like you said, either in a Dubai or a London or a New York City, where we don't necessarily have access to nature. We don't have always the time or the money to be able to go and do a detox retreat with sisters. And for those that are suffering in this space, is there a practice in regards to plant medicine that you have now developed, that you have worked with, that you're like, wow, this needs to be shared?
Yeah. I mean, there are amazing people in every city doing incredible work at every level. And that's what I've found more and more, is that at every access point, from income brackets through social demographics, through urban to rural, whatever it is, there are people at every level now doing the work. And I think once you start to open yourself up to receive a teacher or receive a guide or receive some support, then the people will start to show up. And one core thing about my work is I'm always open to receiving emails or messages from people that are in, say you're in LA. I know people in LA. I'll be like, okay, let me just connect you to this community. Let me connect you to this community. And I love to build connections for people, because I think that's really what we're looking for. Beyond anything else, we're looking for human connection that can support us, and just this knowing that it's accessible at every level. There is no one that is truly disconnected. There will always be a community somewhere that you can tap into if you just start to inquire, if you just ask questions. That's always been how I found my way. Was I would just find people on the internet that I thought, oh, maybe this person looks like they might have an answer for me. And I'd just reach out and send an email. And, next thing you get an answer back, and then you're connected to somebody in your area. So there's the community aspect, which I think is really essential for anybody that's going through an awakening, or beginning to sort of experience new ways of observing the world. And sometimes it can be quite scary. It can be very overwhelming. I know it was for me when I was going through my awakening. I had no community connection. I had no idea what was going on for me, but slowly the connection started to come in. And then I didn't feel as alone. I didn't feel like I was going crazy, because now you have proper supports. So definitely community engagement, and seeking out ways of who might you connect with in your community. But then beyond that, I think, the whole ethos of Food Matters TV is around what are we actually putting into our bodies. And I think that is the biggest fundamental teaching, is no matter where you are in the world, you can eat right. There are ways. If you just put in a little bit of thought and a little bit more action, then you can access. It's not easy by any means, because we have so much GMO, and just, we're eating fruits that have been imported from Peru that are out of season, and just all of this craziness. So starting to get very clear around what's local, what's in season. At least if it's difficult for you to even reach organic, that then what's local, what's in season. Are there any I know there's a lot of these pop-up urban veggie gardens now, and they're like I say, there are people doing amazing things at every level of society all across the world. It just takes a little bit of curiosity to find. So what we're eating, finding a relationship with a plant. So this is one of the teachings that I really love for the women I'm working with that are in big cities. So like we did with the rose, bring a rose or lavender or aloe or whatever it is into your home, and then start to meditate with this plant, start to just sit with the plant, because we're, as our development is such that we mimic humans, we mimic behavior, we mimic movement. So when we start to sort of apply that to plants in some way, this correlation between the experience of the plant, or how the plant grows with its roots, and how it receives light, and how it operates, simply by sitting, by drinking a tea, by meditating with the plant is reminding us of exactly what you went through, Laurentine, which was the rooting into the earth. And at this time, when we are going through such an intensive shift, the most important thing we can do is root. Like there's a lot of movement towards the stars and the galactic energies and all of this, which is amazing. And I work with that frequency myself. But our whole purpose is to really integrate with the earth, to really come home to the earth. And the way that we're going to solve all of the issues that we're experiencing at the moment, every issue we are experiencing at the moment can be resolved by our return to deep communication with the natural order of things. That is where the answers lie. So if communicating with the natural order of things means that you live in a tiny studio apartment, but you can manage to bring a plant in and you can sit with that plant, you can water that plant, you can meditate with that plant, that maybe you can make box veggies in your glass window and, grow some tomatoes or whatever it is, that simple and subtle act is one of the greatest wisdoms that you can connect in order to support yourself and in order to really nourish your soul and build proper communication back with Mother Nature herself.
Oh, I love this chat so much, and that's why I was so happy to have you on the podcast. Ever since we first met online and you were there for me in so many ways, I'm just so excited to share your wisdom and for you to also be able to talk on the topic of rewilding yourself, which is so dear to my heart as well, and to be able to give the sisterhood tools in ways that we can all become more intuitive and reconnect with Mother Earth, with ourselves, with our lineage. And the work you're doing in Ireland, working with your lineage, working with the ancestral trees and working with the land. I think it's just so incredibly powerful. So well done, Cathy. And if you could tell us, the last question, if you could tell us a little bit more about your podcast that you've set up now. It's called Meet Me in the Mushrooms. So I'd love to hear more about how our audience can connect back with you as well and the stories that you share on there.
Yeah. Yes, so I have a podcast. It's called Meet Me in the Mushroom, and we're 4 episodes in, so it's still very much in its birthing phase, but we're very excited about it. And really, it's on a platform called awake.net. So awake.net is a new sort of social media platform that's also just busy birthing. It's still very much in its early phases, but it's coming together really nicely. And it's a space that wants to attract people who are interested in entheogens, people who are facilitating with entheogens from the shamanic realms into the very clinical therapeutic realms, and bring this community together so that we can start to have deeper conversation, basically, and also in many ways to help deal with the issue I spoke about earlier in terms of creating a directory of really, really good facilitators globally so that you can go on there and you can check reviews, you can check out, prices and costings and where people are and what do they offer, and start to build a very solid directory. So that's part of the ethos of awake.net. And my podcast is housed there, and it is exploring psilocybin in particular, although the conversation will kind of grow and expand beyond just psilocybin. But for now, I basically wanted a space where I could speak to the things that I'm interested in and that I know a lot of people are interested in, which is, yes, we want to hear about the new clinical research and the wonderful statistics they're having with psilocybin trials at Imperial College London, and we want to know all about this. But we also want to keep the conversation open for those who are working with this medicine in ritualistic ways or ceremonialist ways or deeply shamanic ways, because the conversation has kind of lost, it's almost becoming so clinical, which is happening with a lot of things now. It's like everything is becoming medicalized, and And with that, we're running this risk of losing this very rich and deep conversation around the magical uses of psilocybin, because this is a magical, vehicle, the shamanistic uses of it. And so I created this podcast with the intention to have a very broad conversation on how really interesting people are working in very different ways with this plant medicine globally. And also because a deep part of my purpose and my mission is to open dialogue that shows that. So I'm an Irish woman, and I want to understand how Irish women work in visionary states. I don't need to travel to Peru to sit with ayahuasca, because I have my own medicines that want to teach me and I want to learn from. So I want to have a space where we can really bring very diverse voices into the conversation and understand how people are working.
Wow, thank you so much, Cathy. It's so inspiring, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on all these topics. And that really concludes the end of this podcast episode with Cathy. And thank you again, Cathy, for joining us and for being such a voice of inspiration to so much of our female kind here. And we wish you all the very best in all that you're venturing out to do in this world. So please stay in touch. And for those that have been enjoying this podcast, make sure you leave a like and also sign up to the foodmatters.com newsletter so that you can stay in touch and see more of the upcoming podcasts that will be taking place in the next couple weeks. Thank you, everybody. Bye.